And here you go. Check in.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, I think I found it. You found it?
Yeah.
There you go.
Nice to meet you. Sophia Joe.
And I'll grab a brochure for you. You're doing that. Okay, check in. Thank you.
I
You're
am.
going to do an amazing job on
Thank
this.
you so much.
Have a good one.
of Los Angeles for providing those problems for the students to get their hands on something real and something that is tangible. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Rocky to continue with the program.
Hi everyone, I'm Rafi Simonian. I work with the committee. We have a student planning committee to organize this tech bootcamp. This is our third one, like Rita mentioned. I just have a few slides to go through before we get to the presentations. First one, I would like to thank the planning committee. The planning committee, they meet a few weeks before our boot camps, and we start planning the entire series of the workshops and the demo day, and how we're going to enroll students and how we're going to market to students. So myself, the Viva is on the committee. Simon is a coach, but he's also on the committee. Simon is a VP of Platform Services from Mobile Forming. They really partner with us. They have two coaches in addition to being on the committee. Adrienne from the Career Center. Where's Adrienne? She's here from the Career Center. Bill from engineering. Bill is here. And just to kind of give us that engineering perspective in terms of how we can reach out to engineering departments within engineering. Heather from the Anderson School. We actually got many MBA students apply to this bootcamp for the first time because Heather promoted within Anderson. JD from the county. JD, unfortunately, is not here today, but he was very involved with this committee. He's doing his MBA at MIT, so he travels every couple of weeks. Sophia is a student, and she was also in one of our teams. And Sophia also participated in our previous boot camp as well. Shaheen is from Sony Pictures, and he also was he helped us with the judging and coming up with the criteria and some ideas on how we should organize it and how we should drill down into the projects. Julia and Joe are both students, and they both participated in our prior boot camp, but they also expressed interest in helping and working with the committee. So that's where we got them engaged. So thank you all for taking all that time and helping us organize this event. Also the judges, we'd like to thank our judges. Peter, Louis is the Chief Deputy CIO, JD actually reports to Peter, and Peter was also a session expert. He attended many of our workshops to kind of walk the students through these problems. He's on his way. He just landed at Burbank Airport at 5:50, so he's on his way. He's one of our judges. Teresa Miller is CIO of Lionsgate. She's our incoming chair for Innovate UCLA, and she really loves our students. She's always supportive of our programs, and she also judged last time. Jim, our Chief Academic Technology Officer and Vice Provost, very supportive of this program, and so when I asked him, he immediately accepted, and thank you, Jim. Katie, founder and principal project manager at Kite Launch Consulting, and she's also a WISDEM mentor with City of Los Angeles. So good to have you. And Kevin from City of Burbank, CIO of City of Burbank, he's also going to be one of the judges today. So thank you, judges. And we just have some gifts for you. Just to thank you for.
We haven't even done it
Yeah.
yet.
Thank you anyway. Okay.
Thank you. See you later.
You really have to judge, but let's see. The next one is the coaches. So Simon, as I mentioned, is on the committee. He's also a coach for 6 weeks. I mean, Mobile Forming, where he works, is in Glendale, and he drove to the workshop every week for 6 weeks. And very dedicated, really helped us kind of put this whole program together. Noeline, the same way, works for Mobile Forming as well, every week from Glendale, coaching our students. And then Kern, is driving from Santa Monica, but it feels like I'm driving from Burbank because it takes probably the same amount of time. Coming from Santa Monica. We have some gifts for you too. Just thank you so much for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers and session topics. So every week we had a speaker. Every week, 6 weeks, we usually the speakers focus mostly on soft skills. First week we had Mary Watkins. She's a UCLA alum. She works for UCLA IT Services. She spoke on user design experience. Second week was Garrett Rainey from Paravita Solutions, data analytics. Unfortunately, he's not here. Mary's not here either. Christina, she said she was going to be coming. She's from Sony Corporation. She didn't make it on that day because of fires, which we're trying to solve. But at least she prepared the slides, product and project management. Andre is a UCLA, is a double alum. He came and spoke from C Digital Labs. He came and spoke about how to pitch. And Zakia Whiteside from Northwestern Mutual, she spoke about diversity and inclusion. She's the director of campus recruiting. Northwestern Mutual also recruits a lot of UCLA students. Shivani Hunwood, she's an attorney, but she's also a social entrepreneur, and she spoke about innovation for social good. She was also supposed to be here, but she had a conflict last minute. So we thank all our speakers. We also thank LA County. Peter, obviously, as you can see, he attended our workshops to just guide the students through these problems. JD over there to the left, and that's Shaheen. He also coached the students and guided them through this process. And Irene from LA County as well, she was there helping the students because they have different specialties. Each person had different specialties on a specific project. So we'd like to thank the LA County as well. And we also had a guest speaker. Devin Reed, he's a UCLA alum. He graduated this year, and he was one of the first participants of the bootcamp, the first bootcamp. And he also worked with us to organize these bootcamps because he noticed that there's a gap in what we're teaching in school and the actual real world. So he knows that gap, and he approached it and said, how can we bridge that gap? And we said, let's come up with these bootcamps. So the format of the first bootcamp was different. But Devin he actually works for Venmo now. He's a software engineer at Venmo, and he's willing to help us be on the committee somehow remotely, help us to, maybe he can help us with sponsorships or help us kind of be involved, and we'll find a way for him to get involved. But the whole idea is that how this is, he's paying it forward because he saw a benefit, how this program benefited him. And he mentioned to me that he used some of the ideas that he learned here in his during his interviews. So, very valuable. So the engagement. So I just put some analytics from the message. I monitor the chatter on Slack. So I'm always monitoring all this great conversation. Big brother watching all these comments. So over there you see that there were 1,224 messages past last 30 days. Wow. And this is just the last 30 days. Of course, just today we probably, I saw like 200 messages that I didn't capture here. I can get the alerts on my phone. And then some of the messages, 47% were messages in private channels, and 53% were in direct messages to each other. Okay? So I didn't have the paid version to go back beyond 30 days. I have the free version, so only 30 days. Okay? And we did a poll on week 6 to the students as to how effective was the team coach concept, and 77% of them said it was excellent, 15% it was good, 8% satisfactory. You have to find out why 8% it was satisfactory. And then would you recommend this bootcamp to other students? 94% thumbs up. Last time it was 100%, so you're going to have to fix that too. And of course, thank you to our students. You've been so wonderful. 6 weeks, we didn't really have any attrition, any students dropping out. I think they enjoyed working on real projects, on tangible projects. And really, thank you to all our students. They were really very engaged, very motivated, very passionate. I personally learned a lot from you, so I appreciate all the time you took to attend, to be part of this great this boot camp. So we appreciate it. We're gonna have gifts for you later. And I think that's all I have. So at this point, we're gonna invite. Let's see. The first team is Team Hestia is gonna present, and we'll let me get your slides. Okay.
Hi everyone, we're Team Hestia. We're named after the Greek goddess of hearth and shelter. I'm Arpi Veshlikian.
I'm Justin Mitchell.
I'm Zalmi Hewen.
And Tanvi Pai.
I'm QJ Young.
I'm Sophia Joe.
And unfortunately Gerald couldn't be here with us today. He's in Seattle. And Nylene was our team coach.
Okay, so to begin, we would like to address the problem. So currently, there's no singular source for information for homeless people within the County of Los Angeles to go to that consolidates these three main elements. First being the basic information about shelter, secondly, directions on how to get to shelter, and lastly, real-time bed availability. This is due to the fact that there's no centralized database at the moment that kind of aggregates all the shelter listings that are available within the County of Los Angeles. And additionally, some of the listings that are provided on these websites are even outdated, so the shelters that most people may click on don't even exist anymore. Additionally, because some shelters don't provide directions on how to actually get there, this can circumvent a lot of homeless people from even wanting to travel to a shelter. And lastly, because there's a lack of real-time bed availability, homeless people aren't aware of, whether there's even beds available if they were to arrive at the shelter. So that's also a prevalent issue. Okay, so why is this also substantial? Well, as time has progressed, the homelessness crisis has actually gotten a lot worse in the county of Los Angeles. As of 2019, 36,300 homeless people currently live within Los Angeles, and 58,936 homeless people are within the county of LA, living in permanent housing. So these numbers have increased by 16% and 12%, respectively, within the last year. So instead of just showing you guys numbers on the actual statistics of homeless people, I'm going to allow Justin to introduce to you guys why people become homeless in the first place.
So the purpose I want to show you guys is Bernadette Ortiz. She's a 39-year-old woman, and she lives in Seattle, actually. She became homeless because her husband kicked her out of her home due to a lot of arguments that they were having, and her husband doesn't even let her see her children anymore because she is homeless, so very backwards. She currently has an infant child in temporary housing, but she's suffering from substance abuse, so it's very hard for her to get a full-time job to be able to get out of the situation that she's currently in. So a lot of these clients are homeless people are dealing with a lot of issues that we have to focus on in the next step.
So, as you can see, I can call a hotline if I like. It's 211, the hotline that gives people gives people information about everyday necessities when they're in crisis. But I don't need that right now. I just need to find a shelter for my family. So when I click on beds, I come to a map view with a bunch of things. But I don't really want so many options, so I want to filter it down. So when I click on filters and I click on family filter, it narrows it down to two lesser options. So then I click on pin and I see that there's a Center for Pacific Asian Families, and I can call the can use all these transportation apps to get there if I want. Another way that I can do this is with the list view. So this just gives me a list of different shelters. And as you can see, the filters are still applied. So it's still going to show me mainly shelters for families. So I think this one still looks pretty good. So when I click on it, I can see more details about the shelter. I can see the resources they have available and what documents they require. Since my family and I have these documents, we can visit the shelter and try to get some beds. So our page is going to talk about why we chose a progressive web app over just a regular website or a mobile application.
So I don't know how many of you have heard of a progressive web application, but the simplest way to put it is that it's a website that functions like a mobile app. Because it's a website, it can be used across multiple devices, any device with access to a browser. As you noticed in our demo, there is no normal browser search bar at the top, nor is there the normal navigation buttons that come on mobile browsers. And that's because you can save the website to your home screen, installing it like an app. And the benefit of this is also that it can cache information on your phone so that it can be used offline as well. And the way that this works is through features in modern browsers such as geolocation APIs and notification APIs that allow you to track the user's location if they try to access something such as a map or send them push notifications through the website. And this is also useful because there's no version fragmentation. So if we push updates to the app, then as long as the user is connected to Wi-Fi or
Stakeholders as the homeless people as well as the county of LA. So to both our stakeholders, it provides a centralized system. In the perspective of the LA County, this is a better tracking system because currently the details for homeless people are very scattered. So some of them are listed in police stations, others are listed in shelters, and some of them are not even listed. So this would provide a better, we hope that this would provide a better tracking system, and it could show the LA County where homeless people are going more, how long it's taking them to get there, what they need the most, do they need food more, do they need medicine more, and this could lead to efficient resource allocation for the LA County. So based on where there's more demand, they can provide transportation, they can provide food, medicine, and other necessities. And in turn, this will provide access to essential resources to the homeless people. And for them, this would be a central platform to get all their resources. So they would get food, medicine, and shelters. And they could call a hotline as well.
So earlier Tanvi and Aarti sort of talked about a proposed solution, and now we'll sort of cover like what are the assumptions that we need for this solution to become a success. So this sort of falls into two main categories, which is the homeless population as well as our proposed mobile app itself. So the first category in terms of the homeless population, we're sort of assuming that a good proportion of them are indeed looking for a temporary solution. So even though our mobile app right now does not provide a long-term permanent solution in terms of housing or shelter, what we realize is that for people at risk of becoming homeless, or who are like just homeless like for the first time, like it's very difficult for them to take the first step. So because of this, what we plan to do with our mobile app is to provide like a gap and a bridge for them to find like a place for them to sort of find refuge when they look for a better option out there. The next assumption we make is that people in the homeless population do have access to smartphones as well as internet connection. So from our understanding of LA County, like there are many resources around in terms of like libraries or parks where the homeless population can access the internet and from there access our mobile app as well. The next thing we also have to try to ensure is that the homeless population has access, have the ability to sort of understand our app and can actually like understand the symbols and how to navigate around. So to try to get around this, we sort of made sure that many of the icons in our app were sort of like big, or at least pretty understandable. So like the large icons like health, like phone number down, and so on. And last thing is that while our app was mainly focused around trying to provide temporary shelter, we also recognize that, like earlier, like what Justin said, like this just can't come by itself. Like we need things like access to like clinics or access to food. So this is why we sort of include these options in as well. the next assumption we have to deal with the mobile application. So in this case, we sort of have to understand that the problem right now is that we don't have like a centralized system for many different kinds of shelters, because right now it's all sort of cluttered in many different areas. So because of this, for our app to become a success, we will have to ensure a way for the shelters to upload like data, input data and make sure that everything's up to date and has an extensive listing. And the next assumption as well is that we also make sure that the shelters around LA County have a way to sort of update their info with like relevant data. For example, in terms of temporary shelters, they can have real-time availability of beds, which is something really important. Yeah, so based on the earlier assumptions that I mentioned about our app itself, we realize that these are actually the main challenges that we have to tackle. So the first major challenge is onboarding major homeless shelter organizations. And this stems from the lack of a centralized database. So like earlier as we mentioned, we're looking through like different places we can find shelters, and like what we realized that it's really all over the place, like whether it's like website like shelterlistings.org, or whether it's through like different app options, or whether it's through the LA Homeless Authority itself. So this is an important issue that we have to solve. So once again, our final problem that we have to ensure that we can fix is the current bed availability. Because right now, like whether it's because of lack of accountability or whether because of like inefficient system, this is clearly a problem that has not been fixed. So RP right now will sort of cover the architecture we need in order to solve these problems.
So here's our proposed technology stack for the progressive web application to work. We decided to go with Node.js and React server-side rendering, and as the backend with the MongoDB database. Those are a lot of technical words, but basically these technologies are best suited for rendering applications quickly and loading all of the data that you need on the server side before sending it to the client, so that as soon as the client opens the app, everything is shown up nicely and they can interact with the app right away. And then the front end will be with React and Webpack, which also assists in fast rendering, and it also makes the site SEO friendly, which means that it's optimizable for the search engine, so that when someone goes into Google, they can easily find our app if they search for LA shelters or LA temporary housing, etc. And like I mentioned before, they can also take advantage of the app will take advantage of the geolocation API and the notifications API to best mimic a mobile app, while also being the website that can load on any device with the browser. And also, as we mentioned earlier, there needs to also exist a shelter-facing layer. So our app right now is client-facing, which means that it's for people that are looking for temporary housing. But in order to update all of the relevant information on the app, we do need a shelter management system as well that will allow shelters to manage all of their day-to-day information, such as bed availability, and update it to a shared database that will show up real time on our app.
So these are the long-term goals that we have for our mobile app. So once we finish launching our minimum viable product, we want to raise awareness for the mobile app by actually marketing it. And we're going to do so by creating flyers and stickers with QR codes placed on them, with the idea that we're going to place them in public areas that homeless people frequent most, that being public restrooms, libraries, parks, so that if they were to scan the QR code, it would lead them directly to the mobile app. Additionally, we would like to work with shelters and just other facilities, so they would also be able to help promote our app as well. For the third step, we would love to implement new features such as having a user profile and shelter profile. So the whole idea of this is that in a user's perspective, the homeless person would be able to input their age, gender, and just different basic information about them that allows them to refine their shelter listing search. And for shelter profiles, we would love to have shelters work with us in order for them to update any contact information they have, as well as update their real-time bed availability. And lastly, in order to really tackle the homelessness crisis, we didn't want to just stop there. We wanted to add on extra resources such as job listings and opportunity scores, which allow homeless people to work towards finding a job, to obtain a more sustainable living. So overall, we ultimately hope that our product is the start of a journey for homeless people to work towards a more sustainable lifestyle, as well as create an overall safer city or county of Los Angeles. Thank you.
Time for judges' questions.
Hi team, how are you? Good. I just have a few questions. My first question is, can you elaborate a little bit more on your sources of data, where you found them, and did you put a lot of thought into how you might go about keeping that data current and accurate?
Yeah, I guess I'll sort of answer. So the data provided to us was just like, for us, we started off by looking at the LASA, like LA County, like homelessness authority data set, which sort of gives you, like we sort of showed the map earlier, which shows like different shelters around there together with like different like, the bed availabilities. And like beyond that as well, we sort of like looking around because even though like they had a bunch of shelters there, like we know for the fact that those are not comprehensive. So we also try to look for stuff on our own. Like what we realized is that the more we look for stuff, like the more different websites we found with information on shelters, which I mean, as we mentioned earlier, like does make things very cluttered. So for example, the one on the left there is actually from this website called shelterlistings.org, which is like an independent organization, but I think partners with LA as well. And this has a list of like shelters there. I mean, but I think the problem with the list over there is that it's only in alphabetical order, you can't filter through it. And the one on the right is from an app done by like, Our Children of LA, which is a whole different organization as well. So, like as mentioned earlier, one thing that our app needs in order to fix the issue would be like some way to incentivize like shelters to actually feed into this whole system. Because without that, like it's pretty difficult to collate all the different databases. So I think once in the roadmap that we mentioned earlier, like once we sort of push our app in, like we have ideas that in terms of trying to get shelter profiles and trying to get shelters to sign up for this option, because this sort of helps them as well to like manage the flow of homeless population into the temporary like, shelters. And because of that, like, we hope that this does incentivize them to sort of update like, their listings.
So I want to try to get to sort of how deeply you dug into this. Did you reach out to any of those shelters to talk with them about the possibility of integrating with them, pulling data feeds, anything like that? Did you dig that deep in speaking with anyone?
So we didn't manage to get opportunity to talk to any homeless shelter authorities, organizations directly.
So, hey, first of all, thanks very much. First of all, I'm very glad you explained ESCI. I did not know that. So it makes sense, actually. I wanted to explore the people side of this a bit more, and any information you had on this. I really appreciated several parts of this. I really appreciated, but one was the assumptions. And one of the big assumptions was that people had access and would use a mobile phone. That's actually kind of key to all of this.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little more about why you think that would be? So one assumption, presumably, is they have cell phones. Is that how true of an assumption is that? That'd be one kind of question. And the other is I can imagine a lot of trust questions. You know, would I trust the city? Would I trust the information or trust the use of this? And then the other thing is how do you actually build the trust? Because I can imagine here's a available bed, and I go there and it's not available anymore. And that's why would I use the app? So there's kind of three dimensions of using this thing that all center around trust. We're going to kind of elaborate across that span.
Yeah, I guess I'll cover the first part of the question about the assumption about the mobile phones thing. When we first started, like we weren't trying to find like concrete data, like how much the homeless population like have access to like phones. So this is kind of fine. But one thing I did actually see was like there was this like study in 2009 on like a survey of like the population around a certain So I think in your experience as well, like
Yeah.
you have noticed it.
Yeah, like all the people that I've worked with had smartphones on them. Like they were mostly Android phones, but they were working, they were functional, they had data and all that type of stuff.
We also consulted JP about this. He's from the County Valley, and he also kind of backed us on that, and he told us that they have smartphones, but we're hoping that even if they don't, if they use computers at libraries, they could still access the website.
So can you take it to that step, so you convinced me they have the phone. So what builds the trust to use the phone, or to use this app on the phone? They have to start trusting it somehow.
Because this is an app that will be offered by the county, it will be a county project, we're pitching it to the county. It kind of comes from the trust that they have in the county that they'll find a shelter. In terms of, you mentioned that it might show bed availability, but when they get to the shelter, the bed won't actually be available. If we incentivize the shelters all to sign up to the management system that updates our app, and it'll be up to the shelters to update that bed availability. And
Yeah, and also a feature plan we have was to have like a reserve feature. So if a bed is available, you can reserve that bed. And then
Yeah, we were thinking similar to hotel reservations. This would be for shelters. Yeah, bed.
but this is all dependent on the shelters updating their stuff.
So can I go? So that's my question, so what are those incentives? What are the incentives? And the one thing I noticed about your map, like I'm not too familiar with funding for homeless shelters, but I imagine they might compete for state and federal funds. So is there an incentive besides goodwill and altruism for them to say, yeah, I want to put myself on equal footing with county shelters versus like a private nonprofit shelter?
Like my understanding in terms of like the whole bid availability thing is that in the first place, like when we looked upon the last of these things, like in the LA homeless authority, I guess, like we noticed that a lot of homeless shelters actually like did have like updates on the number of bids they had. But I guess like the main problem we saw from that was just that even though they had like updates on how many bids they had, they didn't have updates on the amount, like the real time like number of bids. So like the way we understood it is that like many different organizations were already willing to put in the information on the bids out there. So our next step is trying to get them to do this like in a more real time, like you said, like we're getting it done to like a more like real time kind of way, which might be like which is a difficult step for sure, but I do think that this step does benefit like shelters as well, like they're not just the homeless population.
How does it help the shelters?
So, because like you have the issue where it's like if you have inaccurate data on the number of bids and like homeless people come to your place and realize this, you don't have the access. Like I guess you sort of I guess one thing would be like as a shelter, my assumption here is that like, people in the shelter like, genuinely want to help homeless community in the county.
Okay.
So yeah, that's one way.
I think it could also decrease like the possibility of like a volatile situation happening because when I do work with the homeless clients and they're not able to get something that they ask for, sometimes they do get very upset. So having this updated system will help prevent that situation from happening. So say someone went all the way across the city to a little shelter and they found out there was no bed available, they could get upset and cause trouble there. But with the real time bed availability, we'll hopefully be able to prevent that from happening because they can reserve it and have some peace of mind knowing that when they get there, it'll be available.
Gotcha, so I just want to clarify one thing. So you say that you have observed or you assume, like do you know through interviews or research, or is it an assumption that other shelters are updating their data on competitive type sites or similar services? Does that make sense?
Yeah, can you rephrase it?
Oh, I thought I heard that that you believe that there was an incentive for the shelters to update their data because you had observed that happening either on a competitor type of application or, so I'm asking, is it an observation or did you talk to someone to validate that?
That's not.
yeah, it's an observation. A lot of the websites that we found that show shelter listings also provide some number about bed availability, but those numbers are very out of date, and we're assuming that's because it's a third-party application. Those shelters don't necessarily manage their internal workings through that website, and that's why part of our solution is to have a shelter-facing, unifying application through which they can manage their shelter, including bed availability, so that our app can directly show the numbers that they're updating on their site.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Maybe one more question?
Yes. Thank you.
I don't have a microphone.
I think we should both go. 2 questions? Yeah.
I'll get 2 questions.
Did you guys put together any financial information about what this would cost? And then my second question is about security. If you're going to have user profiles and staff profiles, what are you guys going to do about security?
Right now, our app does not have a user profile functionality. It's just for searching for a shelter. Information can be cached, so there can be features such as starring shelters that you want to have quick access to. In terms of security, though, we will be using, since it's a web application, there already exists a lot of secure web frameworks that will allow connections to our website to be secure. Could you repeat the first part of your question?
Did you put together any information about how much it would cost to develop your app?
No, but it will cost less than developing a mobile application because we don't need to develop separate things that will work on iOS or Android or a Windows phone. It's a website, so there will just need to be one version of it that can be rendered on any device with a mobile browser, or even like a desktop browser as well.
Great, thanks.
Great, thank you. Good job, team. I mean, from the first meeting that we had where you were trying to figure out how to scope the problem to where you guys are today, very, very impressive, and it shows the kind of thought process that you went through. The one question I do have was one of the charts where you were showing the estimates of the volume, right? How did you come up with the expected total?
So for the expected total, we calculated research on the website, so it's like around 80% of the homeless people are unsheltered. So this total comes from if we expect 70% of the unsheltered homeless are actively looking for shelters, and 70% of those actively searching for shelters are searching the shelters on daily basis. So we like multiply these portions, and it gets to this data. It's like a monthly total traffic for websites visitors, and this is our total expectation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, am I speaking into the mic? I can't really tell.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Hello everyone, thank you so much for being here. Thank you judges for spending your time with us. We really appreciate it. Our team is Health Score. We're really excited to present to you all what we've been working on. Before we begin, we'll just introduce ourselves really quick. I'm Connor, I'm a sophomore.
I'm Chloe, I'm a second year.
I'm Sophia, I'm a 3rd year.
I'm David, I'm a 4th year.
I'm Lilith, I'm a 4th year.
I'm Verchesvi, 3rd year.
I'm Audrey, I'm a 4th year.
Awesome. Okay, picture this. It's been a really long week, possibly like this week, and it's a Friday night. You've been through this whole long week. You're really excited to go to dinner with your friends and your family. Again, it's been a really long week, so this is the only thing that's been getting you through the week. You head out to your favorite restaurant with your friends or your family. You're excited to have a good time. It's one of your favorite restaurants. You order the same meal every time. It always makes you feel super good. You're having a great time, great conversation, and then afterwards you head home, feeling all in a good mood, and then suddenly your stomach starts feeling a little weird. Then it starts feeling really weird, and then it starts feeling really awful, and then you're in the restroom forever. It's food poisoning, and it's the worst feeling It's one of the worst feelings that you can possibly have, largely because you can't really control when food poisoning happens, or when foodborne illness happens. You go to a restaurant that you really love, expecting to have a great meal, and then you head home, it happens to you, and then you just have to deal with it. You or somebody you know has definitely dealt with food poisoning. I know I definitely have, unfortunately. And it's actually super common in America. 1 in 6 people in America get food poisoning every year. So definitely a huge problem for us. Specifically, foodborne illness actually has huge economic costs associated with it outside of just the personal costs to us. So every year in the US, $15.6 billion is lost due to foodborne illness. This is largely due to the medical costs associated with treating people who have experienced foodborne illness, and also the political costs of like handling all the PR situations of the government, like why didn't we catch it, all that. And then specifically, we can zoom into the micro, to the local businesses, and restaurants that have a foodborne illness outbreak at their restaurant can lose up to $2.6 million. That's revenue, lost future customers, and then also marketing that is trying to get that revenue back. So we see that, of course, foodborne illness has a huge impact on us as consumers who experience it, but also on restaurants themselves and local economy. So for Los Angeles County being such a huge county with so many consumers and so many restaurants, these risks and these costs are amplified.
So, in terms of the 3 main stakeholders for foodborne illnesses, we have the health inspectors, the restaurant owners, and the public. And our health inspectors are tasked with the difficult process of ensuring that restaurants are complying with the standards and guidelines set by the county to ensure that the restaurants that we have in LA are safe and that the public are healthy. Restaurant owners, on the other hand, have to ensure that they're able to process the data that they're given. They're able to intuitively understand where they went wrong, the different violations they've committed, and how they can remedy this to be better, to ensure that the public they serve and that their customers are being treated well and have the best experience when they go to their favorite restaurant and expect to have an amazing meal. And lastly, our public. Obviously, when a foodborne illness occurs, the public, I believe, are the most at stake, and they have the most to lose because their health will be compromised, their lives will be put at significant unease.
Speaking as someone who has worked in the restaurant industry, I'll tell you this much, it's like that's a lot, it's too much. I think information should be more accessible and easier to kind of like dig through to see what's important. And so yeah, you got this type of right here, you gotta look at addresses, you gotta look at cities, zip codes, phones, there's a description of something, it says, I don't even know, and then there's some stuff over there, and then you gotta click all the way to the left to kind of read what you gotta read. So, you know, it'd be kind of cooler if you could do something, that little, that's just so clear.
Okay, so our solution is a mobile app called HealthScore. And so what we're trying to do is make it easier for them. So in terms of health inspectors, they'll be able to better prioritize their upcoming inspections in terms of location or urgency. Restaurant owners will be able to improve their business by staying organized and keeping track of their progress. So, making sure they're up to date on violations that they have in the past, making sure they fix those issues. And we're giving the public transparent information about these different restaurants, and so they'll be able to better choose where they want to go and eat. And so our team chose to focus on restaurant owners and the public for the purposes of our prototype. But once implemented, our system would address all 3 different personas. And so now we're going to demonstrate.
All right, hello. So this is the opening screen of our prototype for the app. So as you can see, so let's imagine you are a member of the public imagine you're a restaurant owner. What would you want in this app, right? Audrey?
Oh,
Do you want to? I can imagine.
oh, okay. So imagine you're a restaurant owner, so you click in the left button on there. And then you would use your login and password, but for people who haven't logged in before, you get a sign-up code. And so based on the activation code, you sign up, you make your username, you make a password, and then you sign up. And then basically this is a dashboard which kind of shows you your health score, your business ID, also.
So what's really interesting about this is it actually tells the restaurant owners where exactly they went wrong and what exactly they can do. A lot of the times what happens is they receive the report but they don't really know how to improve or they don't know if they have improved. So how we plan on solving that situation is basically giving them a sort of a checklist. So if you scroll through, at the top you have general information about the inspection, so restaurant name, the date of inspection, the inspector, your grade, and your score basically. And as you scroll through, you can see the violations and the suggested measures to solve each violation. The really nice part about this is we got this information from the LA County's handbook for the inspectors. So we know this information is official and it's tailored to a specific restaurant and to the specific inspection. So it makes the job of the restaurant owners really simple by having a very specific list of what to do. Also, a really interesting thing to note is we based all of this on actual data provided to us. We used open data and we basically retrieved the data and analyzed it to notice that in this specific inspection of this restaurant called Bamboo Thai Bistro, these were the violations committed. And so yeah, we know that if we can do it for a prototype, it can definitely be done for all of the restaurants, and we basically made to be a useful feature for the restaurant owners. Now we go back, that's the end of our prototype. We're going to talk about.
Now we're going to cover the roadmap, the next steps. So the first step would, of course, be developing the application, incorporating the open data, the database that LA County already has. So the problem is the application. So the county would have the health inspectors learn how to use the app and how to utilize it. And then that is not as hard, of course, as teaching the restaurant owners how to utilize it. So we decided that various ways that could be done was, first of all, emailing the restaurant owners, contacting them saying, okay, you're a restaurant owner, you own a business, a food business, so now this is how it's going to be done. And in the email, explain that this is the new policy. And of course, they might need help setting up a profile. So that could be done through email listings, a detailed step-by-step plan, attaching a video tutorial to help them through the steps, and even hosting info sessions in which they can receive one-on-one personal help to set up their profile. And then the third step would be marketing to the general public, to the consumers, and that could be done by first emailing all registered voters in the LA County, informing them about this new application, and then mandating each restaurant to put up an ad in the front of their business next to their rating to show there's this new application. You could learn all about our inspections and ratings here. And of course, social media through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and especially Yelp to reach the general public. Thank you.
You mentioned Yelp. Have you considered maybe integrating your app with Yelp or any other sort of restaurant type of application?
So we kind of based our design a little bit similar around Yelp so that people could have like a familiarity when navigating through our app, and maybe in like future development we could integrate into Yelp. But for now, I think we we primarily focus this idea for the LA County use, and
Yeah, just to add, right now Yelp actually is a feature that allows users to see the ratings of restaurants. However, what separates our application from Yelp is that our product mainly focuses on filtering out restaurants based on health scores. So for instance, let's say I want to eat in a restaurant in Brentwood, and I'm trying to find a specific restaurant, like a Japanese restaurant with an A rating. And our app will allow the public users to do that, whereas for Yelp, you simply find the rating of the restaurant by searching for the specific name.
Another thing for the future, development for the future of consider is creating an API which can be basically used by any service, or not even a service, any person to basically integrate into their own service. So Yelp could use our database to improve theirs. Not just Yelp, any.
It's that manual, so you're actually giving the information to the restaurant owner, here's what you need to be doing, which is where you were going with that piece of it.
So for that, we want to actually access the manual every time. So ideally, we want to create a database where for each violation you have a set of instructions, and based on the inspection, based on the violations for that instruction, it would access that database to see which violations were committed and basically just print them out in PDF form. So since it's based on a relation databases, it would be much simpler than actually accessing it from PDF and like actually copy pasting that.
But did you actually do it, like for one case?
For the purpose of the prototype, we did it manually, because creating a database would take a lot of work and.
I didn't mean the database, but you actually did that mapping against the manual and an actual report.
Yes, definitely. So we randomly picked out a restaurant. We chose their most recent inspection, and we noticed what violations were committed. And based on the manual, we created instructions for them to implement for future purposes.
On the app itself, we also showed briefly that there's like a button section that showed kind of the violations that the restaurant had based on the most recent report. So the data would also show up in those buttons, and you could click on it, and then it would give you that same list of improvements that you can make.
Go ahead first.
Okay, great, thank you. Good job, Dean. You were talking about different ways of engaging with the restaurant owners, and there was a lot of discussion about using email, right, to do that. Did you consider other ways of engagement besides email communication? And if you did, what were some of those other options that you considered?
Well,
essentially, you can always call people too, you know. That's always the best way, just, you know, talk to people on the phone, you know, or in person.
As Connor mentioned, we understand that it takes a while to implement these kind of things, changing up the system a little bit. So, of course, we wouldn't be as harsh from the start. When their next health inspection, we would have the health inspector go to them, explain, you probably received the email about this, you should check it, this is how things are going to work from now on, and warn them that they should be able to set up a profile, reach out to whoever they need to reach out to help them set up the profile, and then whenever they have their next health inspection, they should have it ready and up and running.
And the process of setting it up is also very simple. In the email, they will get all the instructions. So basically what you would have to do is click on the link for the app, and it would open in the App Store and download by itself. And when it downloads, you basically have to enter the activation code, and you have your account. Your restaurant's already registered, so it's going to show up as soon as you sign up for the service. So at most, it's going to take 2 minutes, so it can be done on-site during the inspection while the inspector is performing the inspection too.
We also talked about just in general that with the like administration being, or not the administration, like the process of that being kind of slow, we recognize that it would kind of take like a lot of effort on the restaurant owner's part. But our goal was to make our app bring a lot of value to restaurant owners, and that they would be able to better access the data that they need to help improve their health score, which would in turn help improve their business. So although we realize that it's like a lot of effort to kind of change up that system, we're hoping that our app will allow restaurant owners to improve their business in the long run.
Thank you.
Is that a one? Quickly?
Yes?
Okay, so I like the slide, the 3 stakeholders. And I feel like I understand the user proposition for the public and mostly for the restaurant owners, but I don't understand what the app does for the health inspectors.
So we kind of mapped out what it would look like when we didn't know which ones we wanted to focus on first. And so a few features we talked about was having, for example, like a calendar, kind of like Google Calendar, where they can input like, I need to go to this place, this time, this day. And then there will be like reminders of when you have to go. It'll show like the order of which restaurants the inspector would need to go to. And then the system would ideally have a way of finding like the most urgent inspection needed, because that's one of the problems that the restaurants that need it the most aren't getting it on time. And so it would be like the restaurant that has like had the longest time since the last inspection, has the most violations, or like kind of like the worst history with the most violations, that type of stuff. So just like an easier way for them to contain records of inspections they've done, inspections they need to do, and also like the calendar feature, which would make it like so much easier for them.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to emphasize more about the prioritization aspect of it, because people from the county were actually telling us the current system for inspectors basically, there's no organized schedule for which restaurant you inspect next. It's basically like arbitrary. So yeah, potentially what we would like to do is implement machine learning to basically predict which restaurants that are at a higher risk of of committing violations based on, as Sophia mentioned, like time passed from the last report, previous scores, how their number of violations have changed in the past. So I think that would be very useful for the county and the health inspectors.
Any more questions? We have room for one more. No? Okay. Thank you so much.
Alright guys, Tetra on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Tetra!
Good evening everyone, thank you for joining us. We are Tetra, and we are here to talk to you about an issue very dear to our hearts. Now before we start, we'd like to ask a question. By a show of hands, how many of you have been affected by wildfires? So as you can see, that's almost 100% consensus. Wildfires are something that affects us all deeply, especially living in California, and especially considering what happened 2 weeks ago when classes were shut down. And to talk about that more, that is what we're here for.
So being a native Californian, I've been exposed to fires my whole life. However, in the past couple of years, you can't seem to go a week without a new headline popping up about a fire. And in peak season, it seems to be like each day there's a new headline before the last fire has even been put out. And with all these headlines, it's easy to become desensitized to them and to forget about the last one as a new one pops up. And if we don't take swift action, California will continue to burn. So I want to give you guys a glimpse into the campfire that raged through Butte County last year in November. So this is a photo taken of Paradise, California. And as you can see, the families that were able to escape the inferno will quite literally have to rebuild their lives from the ground up. So the Paradise campfire was the most destructive fire in California history, with damages over $16.5 billion, and claiming 85 lives. And this is the result of global climate warming, desensitization to fires, and not enough preventative measures being taken to prevent these from happening. So it's not so easy to forget about a fire, however, when they're happening in your own backyard, like Katrina mentioned. So these were photos taken by commuters driving on the 405, and you can see these are exits you would take to get to UCLA, Sunset, Wilshire, and thankfully this fire was put out before any lives were lost. So to give you guys some more context about the impact fires are having on California, just since October of 2019, 200,000 people have already been placed on mandatory evacuation notice in California due to the many fires. Out of the 4.5 million homes
that are identified at higher extreme risk of wildfires. 2 million of those homes are within California. And what is sparking these fires? Well, a really common cause of fires is power lines or electrical malfunctions, with 11 out of the 20 most destructive California wildfire damages. As we can see here, the 2016 Gray Fire amounted to 30,000 acres being burned. And the very next year, with the Thomas Fire, we saw 10 times as much acres being burned. Not to mention the hundreds of thousands of lives that have been displaced for evacuations. But let's try to put these acres into perspective. So a total of 400,000 acres were scorched. Put this across LA County and with UCLA as our reference point in the green marker to see how much land would really be burned to try to understand this impact. When we zoom in, we see that 1, UCLA is gone. 2, even a lovely sandwich shop that gave us dinner today is gone. And even down all the way to Anaheim and up to Fullerton. Obviously, this is a massive amount of damage and land burn in such a short amount of time. And Edison understands the severity of these fires because they've had to pay in millions of lawsuits from homeowners that have been affected, business owners that have been affected, and even from the families of lives that have been lost in the past 2 years. It amounted to a total of $360 million of settlement. Now that Edison has understood their major role in the wildfires that have been cropping up in the past years, they're trying to come up with a major financial plan to try to address this root cause of power line wildfire sparkage. On the right image, you're going to see the blue power lines that span up to SoCal, and that is all of Edison's coverage. As you can see, that's miles of exposed power lines they're willing to replace and thousands of current limiting fuses. That's going to amount to over $500 million in cost.
So is there an answer? So as our team was looking at solutions, we really wanted to look at where we were going to be the most effective and most impactful. When looking at wildfires, we want to look at which communities are affected the most, and these are low-income communities. It takes them longer to rebuild their lives and longer to rebuild their assets. So when we wanted to look at where it was most effective and impactful, we looked at prevention. That way all communities can be equally affected. So what does prevention look like? Looking towards the future at a newer tomorrow, we want to look at a more smarter power grid. What does this entail? A smart grid would look like real-time data. We need real-time data so power line operators can make real-time decisions. On top of that, we need the data to be communicated high speed and reliably. In comes the new technology, synchrophaser technology, which does exactly that. It uses GPS to give timestamp measurement data. It provides more power grid data than. Looking at the case of San Diego Gas and Electric, they have not only implemented synchrophasers, but they've gone one step ahead. They have created their own homegrown automated software where they're able to detect a broken line, and the moment that the broken line is detected, they're able to isolate that segment and turn off the electricity on that power line before it even touches the ground.
First, we have to collab with SDG&E, and then because they have already integrated the broken line detection software system, and with our current system in the SDE network, we already have synchrophasers in place, but we just need to integrate the software system into our synchrophasers right now and to see the actual results. And according to the results, we can go into investing more in the PMU units to scale in higher risk fire areas. So as you can see, we can identify really 2 trends in the problem. First, we see that there are a lot of wildfires that are easily preventable that are caused by electrical wires. And second, as climate change goes on, there can be the risk always increase more as there can be more easily wildfires that are starting around LA County. So we identify many limitations to the problem. First, there's limited number of human resources available in the LA fire departments, and so that means that we need prevention instead of just detecting the fire. And also, our grid infrastructure are really limited in technology compared to the current technology in place. So we can have our own solution. We can update our own grid infrastructure by having our solution to make sure that electrical wildfire can be prevented.
So synchrophasers technology will provide all of this and more. It's going to move our power grid infrastructure into the 21st century modern technology. It will be an investment in our future, and it would be a proactive solution instead of a reactive solution, which is so far what our reaction has been to wildfires. It will be a sense of
power grid resilience, and in the face of climate change, this is exactly what we need.
So we actually talked to a few potential users of this, and two key people actually thought this was an interesting solution. They're kind of at the cutting edge of technology, so we just want to show that customer validation. So anytime we propose a solution, we have to talk about the alternatives. Why didn't you do something else? Well, here's a grid of kind of the smart grid alternatives. If you think of human-based observation as smart, you know, it's just not really practical. Satellites were interesting. They're actually, of course, they're super costly, but they're actually, they have a long latency period. You can see it's bolded very long. That's actually 2 days for MODIS, one of the satellite imaging programs out there, to update the map. And by then, you know, who knows how many images there are. Optical thermal cameras is an interesting one. Again, you face a bit of a practicality issue. Are you going to really create a tower, post a camera at the top of it to kind of scan the area? If not that, quadcopters, but then there's battery life issues. And then there's other stuff that you might not think of, such as dust in the air, or there's a barbecue. Is that a fire that we should go investigate? And also even hills. It obscures the line of sight of the camera. So we scrapped that idea as well. Sensors, this is interesting, real quick, we actually did do a bunch of data analysis, and sensors, right, if you had all the data, sure, anybody, not anybody, UCLA students can analyze and figure this out, but getting that data is really tough, right? Sensors were touted as a pretty good solution. One of the key reasons we went with synchrophasers is because there's existing infrastructure, right? You literally, it's either on the power line or the substation, wherever you put the phaser measurement unit, it's already built out. You don't have to, with sensors, build out an entire grid network. So we don't think synchrophasers, we're not saying it's the one-stop shop to prevent all fires. We're just saying this is achievable, it's practical, and we're gonna take a look at the value and the costs next. The value is huge. Kind of moving from left to right, total US wildfire damages. In the middle is California damages caused by power lines specifically. That 10 billion is things like Camp Fire, Woolsey, Hill Fire. This is from 2018. And then we're going to focus on actually the right-hand side, which is the most, the next step we can take, which is San Diego Gas and Electric, that's SDG&E. They estimated this year that while they have not had a fire since around 2007, if they were to cause one today, it would cost about 3.7 billion. That's real estate, all the damages. So keep that number in mind because it's going to become relevant right now. Right, what's the cost? So let's build up the cost here. $100,000 to upgrade either the transformer or the substation with this synchrophaser capability. If you take Southern California Edison, which has 1,000 substations, multiply those two together, $100 million cost to implement this for all of SCE, 3.7 billion potential value. Yeah, all right. So on the previous slide, I actually showed one quick note is that it was 3.7 billion for SDG&E. That's actually a smaller utility firm than Southern California Edison. They have 150 substations, so that 100 million is actually 15 million. 15 million cost, 3.7 billion value. That's a 200x ROI. And it's actually quite a bit better than that because this is just a one-time cost, and it's not like you need to do this every single year. Once it's there, you just kind of maintain it. There's some run rate costs.
All right, so when we're upgrading our software and also adding on additional hardware, we might run into some issues, right? So we got installation might have some issues, data collection, synchronization, as well as some maybe human to software like interface. And I think the biggest issue that we have to focus on as well is what happens if the PMU accidentally turns off the electricity when there is no issue, right? And the solution to that is we're gonna have like a trial period. Obviously it's not gonna be overnight. It's probably gonna be around 3 to 9 months, if not more, to figure out like to test it, to make sure everything's working properly. In terms of installation, obviously we're gonna try and see if there are any faults with the installation. And then for collection, we're gonna make sure, well, just gonna make sure that everything is collected properly. And that we have the GPS, we have the timestamps, all the data is going to be nice and clean. It's going to be transmitted at a very fast pace, as well as stored properly. We're going to teach employees how to understand all the symbols, how to understand all the signals, and any like updates. And honestly, the worst thing, or the last thing that we want is to be like PG&E, where we turn off the electricity because we're afraid of a fire. Right? As we move towards an age of automation, right, we've faced a bigger risk of being hacked. The the biggest one I can think of right now is Russia hacking Ukraine's electric grid and completely shutting the entire thing off. And the U.S. actually experienced its first cyber attack on its electric grid late of June this year. I'm assuming you guys haven't heard of it, and that's because it was completely neutralized really quickly. No data was taken. Like they didn't even impact our infrastructure, and that just goes to show we have the steps in place to prevent any kind of cyber attack. So we started today's talk with all these grim stats, right? We're talking about how like so many lives have been lost, how many acres have been burned, how many lives have been displaced, how many homes have been destroyed, right? And like clearly it's not going to get any better. But what if we change the narrative? What if instead of accusing like the electric companies of all these awful things that they haven't been doing, what if we made it something more positive, right? I wouldn't mind waking up to something like this. Southern California Edison saved today. What if we change the narrative that instead of attacking them, that we realize that they're actually putting the steps in place to save us and to prevent, maybe we can save some lives, but in addition to that, we're also we're preventing some lives from being threatened in the first place. And that's really our goal. So.
We at Tetra believe that technology is the future. Synchrophasers are the future. And today we walked you through problems, solutions, and implementation. The power is in your hands now. We need to stop California from burning. We need to stop bushfires, and this is how we do it. So who is going to join us in our mission to stop California from burning? Thank you.
Questions?
Hi, team. I heard you say, you had some clarity about this is not a one-stop shop solution, right? Do you have clarity on what kinds of fires can be prevented with the synchrophaser technology and which ones can't?
Yeah, so we were focused on the fires that were caused specifically by power lines and electrical malfunctions, and this synchrophaser technology would directly address those, and we saw that out of in the top 20 most destructive fires, this was the most important cause.
Technology does that because once the power line is broken, it will hit the vegetation nearby, and that's what sparks the wildfire. But if we're able to detect a broken line, stop the electricity from flowing before the power line can hit any vegetation, then it prevents a wildfire from occurring at all without the additional need of more firefighters or any personnel.
So can I take you down a technical bent on this a little bit? This kind of, but you can actually do things, like I said, in a better way. Did you look at, what's your thought on granularity here, cost, fire prevention, all that sort of thing?
Can you elaborate a little bit?
You can put sensors spread out over a much wider area, right? A fewer of them, and you can detect something.
Yeah, I think I can speak a little bit to that, and maybe Ray can as well. So the cost of one fire that SDG&E estimated was $3.7 billion, and you can see the Camp Fire was $16.5 billion, and these fires are super expensive. But for installing about 1,000 of them for SoCal Edison, it was around $100 million cost. So $100 million prevention for all of SoCal Edison versus $3.7 billion of damage for one fire. We could implement a lot more synchrophasers and have them on a lot more poles, and we could still the cost would still be very effective.
And also, I think you're more talking about, because I think Will presented about the wireless sensor system. Are you talking about that, or?
We're just talking about how many you deploy over a fixed area, and the pros and cons of that.
Yeah, we did just one per either substation or the area that a substation covers. If I understand, you're saying if we did 2 of them per substation, just illustratively, would that make it more accurate? We can go look that up. I didn't look it up specifically. That's a great setup. Maybe it gets more accurate or not. I guess it would just be bump up the 100 million to 200 million. So it's not a 200x ROI, it's a 100x ROI.
I think the attraction is trying to get it as many places as we can with the costs that we have given. And then if we need something more specific, we can always add more or less. We have to do more research depending on how much it makes a difference for. but the main thing is to prevent them from occurring and detecting them. So if you just have one and it does the job of two, then why put a second one?
And also for the implementation, we can also like access like the risk map in the LA County and put ones that are in the higher risk area. And we kind of elaborate on that, but yeah, so basically there's like a fire, like different fire zone where it has higher risk due to both like population and also like the amount of people there. So if there's less people, then it might be like harder for the wildfire to be seen. It might have greater like acre burns each time. So we can also use that to see where each one will be placed in the beginning, and to kind of like use that map to see where we should implement this one.
In terms of granularity, sorry. When you put the Cinco phaser, it's able to, you can like, right now what's happening like with PG&E and even in Edison, like because they're worried about certain windstorms, they have to close down the power in certain neighborhoods. So the idea behind that is if we're able to isolate like maybe one block, like okay, if there's an issue there, we can just turn off the power at that specific block. Then you're not affecting whole communities and neighborhoods. And Cinco phasers have that capability because we are splitting up the power grid in like smaller and smaller segments. It also is very dynamic. It also helps like renewable energy. Like it makes the grid more stable so that if there's a larger demand in one area, you can kind of isolate.
Specifically, it shouldn't be that because it's just simply transmitting data.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, so I'm kind of raising a thought question because if you can see some unusual patterns in the transmission, the frequency, the voltage, in some different patterns that could be the result of attack, there's a possibility of detecting.
Definitely like a second phase rollout of this technology, like once they figure out how to do that, that would definitely be implemented.
I wanted to, I liked when you started talking about identifying certain risk areas, because what I keep going back to, and I don't know if I can articulate a concise question in this matter, but I'm a customer of LA DWP, right? And then we've got, Southern California Edison, maybe all around me. So how do you incentivize like competing power communities? Like wonder if Southern California Edison is all around LA's power grid, then why would LA invest in this versus, oh, I'll just let Southern California Edison do it because they're in all the wild, like they have less urbanization. They're closer to where all the dead brush is. So were you able to look into like power grid maps and kind of how they overlap, or like where maybe some of these power companies can come together and invest together? Have you thought through any of those kind of issues?
So we didn't look necessarily at the maps itself, but Andy did bring up a good point about lawsuits, right? And while SoCal Edison is the bigger one, LADWP was the one responsible for the most recent fire, right? So incentive right there. With all the lawsuits piling up against them, this is a much cheaper alternative than facing all these lawsuits, having to pay, having to deal with all these complaints, annoy customers, right? That's the last thing a company wants.
On top of that, like the Cinco phasers, typically they're not being used for fire detection. This is very specific to San Diego.
Okay.
But moving into the future, like if you're reading all the electrical engineering papers, like they're saying Cinco phasers are the future. Right now, everything's pretty manual and slow. Cinco phasers are really fast. They're able to collect a lot of data that they're not currently collecting, and they're able to manage the grid real time, which isn't the case right now. So beyond just fire, it gives power grid operators so much more control, and they're able to make decisions real time and isolate things regardless of the fire. So it's just so many benefits. On top of that, adding on renewables to the grid adds a lot of fluctuations to the power grid. And like I said, like if they need to isolate a demand or supply somewhere, they can do that with Cinco phasers. Versus right now, if there's too large of a demand, it could just turn off the whole grid. You know, so there's just so many potential benefits to Cinco phasers and so many potentials that haven't even been like researched yet. Just moving in that direction is already like, there's an initiative right now to get more power utilities, regardless of private company or what, like to move towards Cinco phasers.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Actually,
very compelling reasons to implement this technology, right? Comparing what is happening in San Diego, some of the ROI and everything else. What are some impediments as to why it hasn't been implemented?
Thanks, Peter.
Oh, no, sorry.
the presentation that they find it really outdated. Like they were looking into it back in 2009. I think SCG&E recently implemented it. It's like
Within the last year.
yeah, within the last year, right? And we couldn't find many articles like specifically talking about like the pros and cons or like how it's helped so far. So this is just something that we're just it's really new and we're just trying to get the idea out there.
It's been studied since the 1980s, but only recently has it been starting to move into commercialization. So we just think it's very new technology. There's like that initiative to get more companies to move towards it, but it's just pretty new at this point.
I can add a quick note on that. So I don't have electrical engineering background, but here's two dips. So GE Grid Solutions, right, they're also working on synchronizers. And then also, just in terms of, this is basically IoT, right? And I actually worked at a company called GE Digital, which somewhat imploded because this is an incredibly hard problem. Even anomaly detection, something you think as simple as just collecting data and detecting an anomaly, well, how do you define an anomaly? So it's, I think part of it could be, and again, more research. We do need to do more research, but I think part of it could just be it's such a tough problem. But like Abby or Julia said, we'd say, hey, this is the right direction, and there's so much money going into these kinds of IoT solutions. It's going to make it at some point.
And it's only going to get worse from here, so it's better we start action now and we start preventing this. Public opinion is going to play a big role in the direction of what we can.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to take a 15 to 20-minute break. The judges will deliberate, and then we'll come back with the results.
Pretty solid. The test I was always on the implementation. I thought there was, even though they couldn't implement it.
Niche consulting company under Accenture, and they do specifically like Microsoft Technologies consulting for different companies around SoCal, and like I was interviewing with them, but
Right off your link.
Doug, Kurt. Before I make the announcements of which team has won which category, I want to give out the certificates of participation to all students who participate. You don't get an official degree, but this is kind of like a degree. Okay, but trust me. Graduation diploma.
It's only Rafi, 2 more years ago.
Connor. Let's see. David. Let's see. Lilith. Chloe. Okay, so the categories are 3 categories. Thoroughness and delivery. This is basically how much research the team put into their project, to the problem that were provided to them, how thoroughly thought about everything from technology to cost to finances to implementation and so forth. The second one is pitch, how they presented the storytelling, and then the implementation, how did they think through the implementation process. So those are the 3 categories. All winning teams, members, get $15 Amazon gift card. The team that wins more than one category, or if all 3 teams each win a category, they all get to go to Staples Center next month, January 16th, a tour of Staples Center. The team that wins most, or if a team wins more than one category, that team gets to go. Okay? So for thoroughness and delivery, Tetra. With the coaches.
Yeah.
Let's go by age.
All right, take 3. 1, 2, 3. Another one. Okay, 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Okay, for the pitch, the storytelling and the presentation, it was also Tetra. Yes, different category. Just switch it, yeah. Switch up a little bit. Current in the middle.
All right, I'm going to 2 for this one. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. All right.
For best implementation, you're like I'm best implementation, Hestia.
Right.
Oh, I see. Yeah. You should go to center. Yeah.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that flash.
Okay.
I see a little bit of it.
Thank you. We'll make arrangements for the Staples Center visit. Okay? January 16th, once we come. Okay. I want to give the judges an opportunity to give their feedback about the pitches, about the presentations, the implementation. Do you have any feedback?
So, having given a lot of pitches of projects myself in the corporate setting, I would always recommend having an appendix of slides so that when you have questions that come up, such as like, oh, did you do those user interviews, or where did you collect the data from then you could like quickly go to that slide and speak to it. I don't think any of you had appendices, so just another tool for you guys to speak to some of the answers that the judges
The first piece of feedback I want to give to all of the teams is that since I've gotten involved with Innovate at UCLA and started dealing with some of the young folks, I want to say that I'm extremely pleased. And I continue to walk away feeling good about the future by hearing, seeing you guys do such great work. With that said, just a couple, team specific, but just a couple of points of feedback I want to give. You guys were actually giving your pitches to an audience, but you're also giving them to the judges. And there were quite a few times I looked up and noticed that speakers weren't addressing the people that were judging. So just remember that in the future. You want to scan the entire audience. When you're talking to a big audience, you got to make sure you make contact with people in all areas of the audience. The other thing that I noted was that you always, when you're presenting as a team, you guys kind of want to have your roles very well defined when it comes to answering questions. So, for instance, you're going to take all the interface questions, you're going to take any security questions, you'll take any of these kind of questions, right? So that when the questions come, you can immediately jump on them without having to look at each other to figure out who's going to answer it. Just my chance.
First off, I think everybody did an amazing job, a lot of enthusiasm, and I just saw that throughout all the presentations. It was really, really close for team health score. We were very, very close on a lot of different areas. I think really when you look at the three problems that were trying to be tackled, it just seemed like wildfires and homelessness are really important issues here in Los Angeles. And I don't know if the whole health score, or the health, I guess, I don't even know exactly what the problem definition was. So I just think that was really the factor that, for the judges, that really kind of impacted our overall view of how everybody did. But I thought you guys did excellent. You were very thorough. You're definitely my number one in some of the categories. So I just wanted to let you know that I thought you did a great job.
I guess we're all giving feedback. You know how when you're put on the spot, like trying to make a decision like this, and you have to kind of sweat it out when it gets really close. I really sweated it out, so it was very close in a lot of respects. If you look at my charts, I always draw a flow chart when I listen to these things and try to understand where the transitions are and how it goes from one to the other. It's clearer here because you're going from one person to the next. I think everyone did a pretty good job, but sort of not being critical, but more of a point of something to think about. Putting the problem up front first. A lot of times the setting was put first, but not what we're actually trying to solve. We kind of got partway through to what you were really doing against what the overall setting was. And so getting that closer, I think, would be one little piece of advice going forward. But I want to congratulate everyone on the flows, because I could draw if I could draw it, then you were doing it. I think the other thing, the digging into some of the data, that actually becomes where the credibility comes in. And so if you're putting together some references, I asked one question on the health score about how did you map against the plan against the data. All three teams had examples like that, and those really, really stand out. So I kind of put asterisks by those things and want to congratulate digging in and that kind of thing, because that's where the meat and potatoes are and credibility. So a couple things that stood out for me as I was trying to sweat it out through this decision.
Last but not least, thank you so much for allowing and inviting the county to this project. It has been very informative for us. I know you guys worked very, very hard for it. So thank you all. You guys did an amazing job. The only couple of things that I'd like to kind of mention is kind of what to build on what Katie and Kevin are saying, is that when you make pitches and you're trying to make a case or sell an idea, spend enough time to also say, what would some of the judges or some of the people that you're pitching to would ask questions that you may have not thought about. right? Some of the assumptions that you talk about and you plan for, validate them, right? And how you validate them to strengthen your case, right, is very important. And prepare for those so that you always have in an appendix a stash of things that you could pull out and be able to demonstrate that you have thought about these issues and how they may have been addressed. So those are only a couple of things, but overall, amazing job for all three teams. So thank you very much for having the county be part of this.
One thing, we'll do a group picture at the end, but one thing is that if you are interested in being part of a committee or sponsoring a boot camp for your company, because you have this great talent here, so this is an opportunity to talk to us, talk to me, and we'll be happy to accommodate that. And I'll pass it on to Jim for closing remarks.
Should I just do it from here?
You can do it from there, yeah, if you like.
I'll just do it. I really appreciate the opportunity to just make a couple of remarks. For those of you who don't know, it's through my office that this program is sponsored, and I'm really, really quite proud of it. I want to thank Rafi and Davida for taking this forward, and also want to thank all of the other people who have been involved in this whole business of involving industry and different mentors and facilitators with you is from my perspective, fantastic. I actually would really like to hear from you how you like the program. Are you getting some things from this? Because we think it's so good from your response, we're trying to expand it going forward and actually take it out to the city of Los Angeles as well, along a number of different areas. So very much like to hear from you. But the general comment goes something like this. I've been on the campus for 20 years, and I have yet to be tired walking around the campus. What I actually do is I always try to walk across campus during class change, not in between. And the reason I like to do it is just to kind of get that sense of the wave of the students going through here, and the campus is just fabulous for that. And the reason is, one of the reasons I've been here for 20 years is the students. And if you haven't been told this recently, you are so smart, you're so good, the ability to tackle these kinds of problems, the ability to put thoughts together and take this forward is unbelievably good. And I hear that day in and day out, and every year for 20 years I've heard that. So I wanted to pass this along. That's why I'm so impressed with this program. But if you haven't heard that, you are really, really good. I hope the program is valuable. In light of that, the program is valuable because it's useful if it can bring how good you are together with some experience on some of these really hard problems. So these are really big, hard problems. And I hope also the program provides you something that's tangible. We called it looks like a diploma, right? But actually, it is our intent that this is something that you can take forward if you're doing an interview, trying to promote yourself professionally, put it on LinkedIn, whatever. That actually is tangible and useful, and we hope it actually becomes that. We'd like to know that. We'd like to take it forward more strongly. The other thing here is this format. We really are truly looking for something that has to exist for you and for the professional side, that's between classes and between all the other stuff that's not classes, just the student climate. And so really like to hear from you on this kind of format, kind of sitting between, giving you some skills, giving you some experience, giving you some thought processes that make sense for you. And again, from our side, it's a two-way street here. Just the thought process on these really hard problems leaves lots of good ideas. So I take these ideas and run with them as we do different things. So I'm just trying to describe a two-way street that I find very, very valuable. I hope you do as well. I'd really like to hear whether you do. And if this program is good, we would like to keep it going. So let us know. But thank you very much, and I really appreciate it. It was really fantastic to be one of the judges, and I appreciate being among this group. So thank you very, very much.
People in the back. One, two, three. Two more. One, two, three. Just say there's no.